Thank you all. Welcome back to our afternoon of budget hearings here at the House Appropriations Committee. This afternoon, we are joined by the Department of Agriculture and our Secretary Redding. I was thinking about what I could say. You've been here. You've been here definitely the whole time I've been here. How many administrations have you been with? 3 governors. All right. So glad to have the expertise of Secretary Redding and the Department of Agriculture. Before we begin, Chairman Struzzi, any introductory comments?
Yes, if I may, Mr. Chairman, before we begin the Ag Committee hearing and welcome Secretary Redding, I would like to clarify some of the statements that were made this morning during the Attorney General hearing. You know, I think when we're looking at a $51.5 billion spending proposal, every member should have the opportunity to ask a question, and there should not be a time limit on those hearings. We did not ask for a time limit on the hearings or for them to be entered shorter. We were referring to on day one, when you said that we would come back from lunch at 1:15, we were here ready to start the hearing, and you guys did not come back until 2:15. So we were here at 1:45. You didn't come back until 2:15 that first day. That's what we were trying to make sure didn't happen again. I think that needs to be said. And so I hope that moving forward, every member of this committee who wants to speak will have the time to speak and the opportunity to speak, sticking within the 5-minute time limit. I think that's fair.
I thank the gentleman for his comments. That is not actual. That is not accurate. But we can have that conversation afterwards, because at this point we are eating into time for us to have this budget hearing. But again,
okay. Well, I would just like then to say, welcome, Secretary Redding. We look forward to hearing your testimony. Ag is the most important economic driver for this Commonwealth, and we need to do everything we can to support those endeavors. So, thank you.
Just so we're clear, your office actually just agreed to limiting the number of folks that we had speaking so we could stay in the time frame, which is totally contradictory to what you just said about everybody being able to speak.
Well, if there's time.
We will move on, Mr. Chairman. We can talk about this afterwards. I'll try to keep.
I will do that.
All right. Thank you, sir. Mr. Secretary, if you would like to introduce who you have with you at the table.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Always honored to have Executive Deputy Secretary Greg Hustetter with me any day, but particularly at this meeting and hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. If you would stand up so I can swear everyone in so we can get started. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, so help you God? Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Please have a seat, and we're going to get started with Representative Flood.
Oh, sorry, I didn't hear you. I apologize.
Oh, absolutely. Representative Flood.
Thank you. Welcome, Secretary Redding. Given our concerns with the continued increases proposed by the governors across all agencies, please explain some of the significant new spending and initiatives that, such as agriculture and preparedness and response. There's a decrease of a total of $23 million, or 67%, which includes a reduction of $25 million for the program and funding for a new $20 million initiative for increased testing capacity in Western Pennsylvania. I have to ask, is this your decision or recommendation or the decision of the governor? And just real quick, because I have a whole lot of questions to get to. So.
Yeah, it's my decision.
Okay, it's your decision. Okay, I know it's stated in the governor's executive budget theme section that prior year funding is reportedly available, but why redirect funding to increase unrelated spending at the expense of continuing to ensure funding is available to test, respond, and support our agricultural industry?
Yeah, Representative, thank you. So a couple of reasons. One, we've been very fortunate over the last 3 years to build a recovery fund that's restricted account. It's got a balance of $61.5 million for High Path AI recovery. We felt in this year that we also have pressures around innovation, as we saw in the first round of innovation grants, and also food assistance continues to grow. So we reallocated that $25 million to those 2 areas particularly.
Well, I know that we are ahead of the rest of the country when it comes to managing high-path avian flu now, but we are seeing a resurgence in the outbreak similar to that of 2022. So I'm actually stunned at the willful redirection of these funds to increase the existing grant funding that has no oversight when the rest of our country is overwhelmed with outbreaks of HPAI and destroying millions of birds as a result.
Yeah, Representative, thank you. We continue to be the only state with a recovery fund in the nation for high-path AI, and it's really proven to be critical to our success. We're pleased with that. We've got the fund secured, as I noted. So nothing in jeopardy there. And when you look at the rest of the animal health investments in this budget, they're significant, probably totaling about $130 million. So I feel very secure in that, and that we've been judicious in the use of those funds over the last 3 years.
Okay, well, I don't understand the decision, especially when the governor's budget states this budget makes this investment and calls on the General Assembly to provide flexibility in the event future resources are needed to assist farmers with losses due to high-path avian influenza. And in particular, in my district in Northampton County, we are seeing these birds. It is so sad and of a situation. And then, you know, why are we risking the poultry industry when the Department of Ag originally stated that with PA ranking fourth in the overall egg production, this could have an economic impact of approximately $13 billion and affect over 50,000 jobs and $3.2 billion in wages.
Yeah, again, I think the security comes from the restricted account with $60+ million in it. That also, the fund includes money for testing. It's about another $18 million. So when you add them up, you've got $80 million in a restricted fund. And that has been, I think, the driver of we felt comfortable reallocating to other priorities in the governor's budget. So we need the innovation to allow those farms to continue to grow. We need the food assistance as we know in our community. So that's the balance in this budget. But we feel very secure in the reallocation of those funds.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank the gentlelady. Representative Abney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good to see you again, Mr. Secretary, and
Likewise.
thank you for being here and your staff for being here as well. I'm excited to talk about Pennsylvania's #1 industry, agriculture, and I wanted to give you the opportunity to update the members who are here, as well as those who may be watching online, about the state of agriculture here in the Commonwealth.
Yeah, Representative, good to see you, and thank you. It's, as the Chairman Struzzi noted, I mean, it's an important part of our economy. I'm always proud to talk about it. We see it everywhere we go. We get a chance when we're each of the members here at your respective events. You see the power of that industry in your local communities. This is sort of a tale of two ag economies, to be honest. We've got a lot of pressures around the world, what we're seeing in both tariffs and workforce issues. Depending on what commodity you're in this state and nation, has a lot to do with the profitability. But to say about Pennsylvania agriculture, it's strong, it's secure, it's growing, it's diverse. It's $132 billion of economic activity every year, 18% of Pennsylvania's gross state product. The dynamics are seen in the ag census. We've lost some farms and built some strength in terms of the average farm size, and certainly the total value of farm production is up as well. But we are not immune to the challenges that are part of our economy. But I think in Pennsylvania, we can be proud that we've got this wonderful diversity of both products and people and places that gives us a lot of resiliency and really a good sort of risk mitigation, if you will, to a lot of what we see happening around the world. I'm proud of it, and particularly proud of the people that are in it, with 560,000 jobs tied to agriculture.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that. And just sort of transitioning a little bit, Mr. Secretary, I know you were aware last December we were granted Section 1115 Medicaid waiver. There is a nutrition provision in there that can be used for things like home delivery for meals, pantry stocking to prevent pregnant or postpartum mothers for 6 months, and medically tailored meals for individuals with nutrition-related illnesses. Just curious, is the department playing a role in how those provisions are being created?
Yes, we are, and we're excited about it. It's the food is medicine. We say that all the time, but inside of that 1115 waiver is where we're going to be connecting our sort of farmers and farmers markets to those who need that assistance.
That's all that I have. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate it.
Thank the gentleman. Representative Krupa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Welcome, Secretary Reding and
you.
staff. It's always very good to see you. I have questions about the Agricultural Innovation Development Program, one of the largest expenditures in the new budget proposals. The current program was established this year, but the budget proposes a total increase of $15 million and includes 2 new initiatives, $13 million to increase support and attract innovative agricultural businesses. That includes energy and conservation projects, and $2 million for a county-based digester pilot program. That's a lot to unpack with this request, because not simply because of the significant increase, but because it's adding to a new program that was implemented during the current year. And you have already awarded $10 million in less than a year. This committee previously has expressed concern about fiscal accountability and oversight with such a large new funding program when first proposed, and this month you announced that all $10 million was already awarded for the current year. So first of all, I am generally excited to see taxpayer money going back to our farmers. I think they're the heart of the community. But I have to ask, how were you able to review and score all of these applications for a new program so fast? Didn't you need time to review and prepare guidelines for this new program and ensure stringent reviews for such innovative projects?
Yeah, Representative, thank you. Thanks for acknowledging both the importance of agriculture and those investments in innovation. We were excited to have an innovation fund, and it's the first time in our history and one of the only innovation funds in the nation that Departments of Agriculture run. So we had $68 million in requests for $10 million of available money. We handled this like we did many of the Farm Bill grant programs with an internal review team. There were a couple of really important innovation principles around whether it's relevant and it's practical, it's accessible, it's scalable, and the value to that triple bottom line that we often speak of. So it was done under the same sort of review that we do with other grant programs, albeit sort of the size and scale of this was significant just because of the number of applications. But we ended up at a good place, and all of those sort of met the requirements that we set forth last year. We set forth in the grant program, and we'll follow that again as we look to increase this to $25 million.
So is there a specific definition or guidelines for what qualifies as one of these innovative agricultural businesses?
So you can appreciate innovation looks different to everybody, right? And I say this often that there are folks in the agricultural community that feel like if there's a robotic milker, that's the innovation. If you're putting a GPS unit on a tractor, that's innovation. You go to the other end of the spectrum, and there are folks using, scanners and optic scanners, particularly to do, sorting of product. That's the spectrum. We tried to be realistic that agriculture is diverse. We need to be diverse in the way we approach the innovation, and really took a broad and comprehensive. But at the end of the day, it's about practical implementation of ideas that result in introduction of new goods and services. So that's the broad definition.
What policies do you have internally to ensure that the grants are awarded competitively?
Internal controls. So we stand for audits through our budget office and as one mechanism. Certainly all of these go through contracts and procurement, so there's another check on the legal side. Everything goes through the procurement and the budget office for final payment. So that's the check. We put that screen on every grant that we've done.
And with the same respect, transparency, what is your department doing to make sure that this grant application process, the awarding of these grants, that process is all transparent?
Well, you can look at all of the awards that we make on, they're online to look at. There's an internal review team that's looking at those. I think we've tried to be completely transparent with what comes in, both by the applicant and what they're asking for, and the money and the principles. So I think all of that's in view for the public to see.
As Secretary of the Department of Ag, can you explain why the governor is more interested in spending money on grant programs for your department than prioritizing ag preparedness and responsive funding?
Well, so again, as I mentioned earlier, so we made a decision to reallocate within the Department of Agriculture's budget based on the security we have in the recovery funds for High Path AI that's been built over 3 governors, and that's got a fund of $61 million. We felt very comfortable reallocating to other priorities inside the department, by the way, right, to innovation and to the food program. So I think that was the request that we made, was to reallocate within and address some of the high priorities. So he's been very supportive of agriculture and then allowing us to reallocate those dollars without compromising anything on the High Path AI recovery.
I want to thank you for your testimony. My time is up.
Thank the gentlelady. Representative Fleming.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hello, Secretary.
Good to see you.
Deputies and Ag staff, it's great to have you here. As part of the 25-26 budget proposal, the executive budget includes a $4 million increase for the Pennsylvania Agriculture Surplus System, as well as a $4 million increase to the core state food purchase program. I'm curious as to, number one, are those increases adequate? And how do you drive out those dollars? Is there a formula? Is everything spread through to the counties equally? How do you make that determination in terms of how those dollars are driven out?
Yeah, Representative, thank you. Yeah, so there's 2 different pieces, right? The state food purchase program, which is money that goes to the counties. There's a formula that includes a number of different things: unemployment rate, poverty rates, there's et cetera. That drives out the bulk of that. The PASS program is a contractual relationship that we have with Feeding Pennsylvania. They manage that on our behalf, but they're purchasing food and working with the farms. So it goes in 2 different directions.
Yeah.
Every 67 county on the state food purchase and directly under competitive contract to Feeding Pennsylvania.
Excellent. Yeah, I mean, as you know, I serve Dauphin County, parts of Dauphin County, and we are so blessed to have the Central Pennsylvania Food Bank, which serves a 27-county area. It's absolutely huge from a geographic standpoint. And we also have, we're blessed to have, food pantries in my district that serve the need. What really worries me is the fact that we thought COVID was going to be the high watermark for the need that we see in terms of food insecurity, and that's just not the case. In addition to this funding, what more can we do to help feed our neighbors and especially kids who are food insecure?
Yeah, so I say it all the time. When you look at the food pyramid, the very base of that is private giving that each of us do, right? So then you add on to that sort of the federal funding and support, and then on top of that, third tier is the state support is important. Anything that we can do right now that connects a farmer to a consumer, whether they can pay or they have challenges in that and they're food insecure, we should try to help them. It's one of the issues that we're watching very closely on the federal side, right? We've been the beneficiary of a lot of federal funds that have come for food and nutrition to build that capacity. It's also building the capacity, just to say the fresh food financing is a part of that, what we've done through the PA Farm Bill, the Resilient Food Initiative. So whatever you can advocate for, be sensitive to as well, just the general funding support that we have to work with the food banks and the counties across Pennsylvania.
Yeah, and you touched on it, but I just want to highlight a little more and dig a little deeper. As we see what's happening on the federal side and the Department of Government Efficiency and things like that, if there were to be steep cuts on the federal side or a pullback of federal funds that are given to Pennsylvania, what could the impact of that be here?
Well, again, it's a range of things, right, because of the use of the dollars that we have from the federal government. Some of that may show up directly inside of a food bank and the administrative costs to handle product. It will be a lot of product ultimately, right? It's about surplus product. Important to note that the USDA last year bought about $285 million worth of Pennsylvania agricultural product to put into the pipeline. Beautiful. So if it's not there, obviously there's going to be implications both for food and the farmer. So it's important. We're watching it very closely, Representative. I'll just tell you that it's almost a daily movement of of activity there, but
Right.
we're very concerned about making sure that the food and food availability that we need is there, and if we don't have that, what can we do at the state to support it?
Well, it's always great to see you. Thank you for your exemplary service. I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank the gentleman. Representative Brown.
Thank you, Chairman. Welcome, Secretary Redding.
Good to see you.
So Pennsylvania used to be one of the largest producers of industrial hemp for fiber. And you and I have talked a little bit about this in the past because I have a potentially very large producer in my district. The USDA predicts that by 2030, the global market could be as big as $16.75 billion. So my question is, given the fixation with adult use cannabis, will the department dedicate just as much time and resources to a historical, valuable crop to Pennsylvania that has untapped economic development potential?
Representative, thank you. Yes, and having been to your district and met with farmers there, I think they see that opportunity as well as some of the processors. So we have for 8 years since the industrial hemp program became available to us through the 2018 Farm Bill, have been engaged in this conversation. The challenge has been sort of two levels. One, of investment, right? Finding enough investment, whether public or private, to do that. And then two, sort of creating this marketplace for the various sort of hemp products that are that we see. So the short answer is yes, we want to, been working at that. One of the innovation grants that we mentioned earlier go for one of the companies that we think has great potential in that area.
I get that it would take a lot of investment as it relates to equipment and processing, but yet we're going to be investing in this cannabis market that is not traditional agriculture. So what specifically can we do moving forward to grow industrial hemp?
Yeah, so I look at this, it's an and not an or. I mean, I really believe that the cannabis plant, so on the industrial side, it has got a lot of potential. So we need to find resources. If you want to jumpstart that, creating a fund, right? Do an innovation fund for industrial hemp. But that takes money of investment. The USDA has been very slow to do that, I'll just say. Congress was quick to pass the Farm Bill and authorize it, but there's no sort of direct investment in the U.S. hemp industry through the USDA. There's some through the National Science Foundation, which we have secured one of those grants, but direct state investment in the companies that you've identified is the important part right now, is to get that infusion of cash to help them get launched.
So where specifically in Pennsylvania have we invested already in this market?
Where have we? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there is one, I don't know the exact county, it's Bass Labs Processing. That came in as one of our innovation funds. We've done several other direct investments on research projects to help, I think around $400,000 on the research side. The Innovation Fund has two other projects of total investments about $520,000. And there's a steering committee that's been really helpful to us to look at the market and try to figure out how to best support it. But total investment is somewhere around $1.5 million to help. 3 of those are actually investments in the company.
Well, I'd certainly welcome you back to Lawrence County to be able to take another look at the potential that we have to open up this market.
We'd love to. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank the gentlelady, Representative Malagari.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary, welcome back. I'm going to jump right in. So one of the greatest successes of the past several years has been the Agricultural Conservation Assistance Program. I wanted to ask, just for everyone's awareness, the program provides funding for farmers to incorporate best management practices into their operations. I wanted to ask, what have you seen as the program? How is it doing? Is it successful? And can it be sustainable in the years to come?
Yeah, Representative, thank you. It's amazing. I think it's completely transformed the conversation about conservation investments in Pennsylvania. We started that, as you recall, with ARPA federal funds that put $154 million into Pennsylvania. 1,900 contracts have been signed. Every state participating, which is the other really important part. A lot of things we do is sort of bay-centric. This is statewide. So we have seen, investments in buffers, in conservation, all kinds of conservation practices. The sustainability part, you took a step last year to create the ACAP funding, and part of that is funded out of sort of general revenues and tax revenue. And we have in the Clean Streams Fund about 50 million, 40 of that or so, 35 is ACAP. There's some nutrient management. So it has sustainability. And I think that's the important part. We can keep that momentum. It's built a center for sort of professional services out of Penn State. We're just a very different place because of ACAP investment. So the Center for Ag Conservation Assisted Training. Importantly, connected to a previous question about half of the projects that we've done in Pennsylvania use federal funding to actually complete that project.
I have a follow-up, not necessarily to that, but a different question altogether. You're very familiar with my district. You're very familiar with Clemens Food Group, a pork processing facility, but adjacent to us is Alderfer's Poultry, and understanding that the laboratory that we have for the pathogens that come across with the Pennsylvania Rapid Response Disaster Account and that money that's utilized for that, what you're seeing, are you prepared for continuing to fight against not only swine flu, which still comes about within the populations, but also furthermore with the reality that we may have to start vaccinating our flocks of chickens? And what is that impact going to be on the economics of the chicken industry and the poultry industry in Pennsylvania?
Yeah, so hard to give a short answer to all of that, but just to say that, I think in Pennsylvania's history, we got an Animal Health Diagnostic Commission and a paddles lab because of high-path AI in 1983-84. So looking back, and over the course of 40 years, we've built this amazing and complex, very responsive system. So feel assured that we've got the paddle system built with our land-grant university and the New Bolton Center, as well as our vet lab here in Harrisburg. We have a recovery fund that's the only one in the nation, as I've noted, with 61 million plus in available balance. We have a network of industry partners. We've got the USDA has been part of that. So I feel very, very sure that we can respond to it. It's complicated in that it's continuing to swirl around both the world and here in PA. So we're prepared to respond to it. We're going to need the resources we have. We're going to need the best research. We're going to need the vaccines to do it. Final point would be vaccination is going to take a lot of people, right? That is not in anybody's payroll. It's not in the state. It's not in the federal government. It's not in most companies. So we're going to have to talk about, how do you actually administer the vaccines that the federal administration wants to provide? That's the piece that makes me nervous. How do you do that? How quickly can you do that? That's a time issue. It's a people issue.
Thank you. I thank you for your responses. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank the gentleman. Representative Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Secretary Redding, Deputy Secretary Hostetter, good to see you guys here today. Ag is, really a bipartisan issue, a major industry in Pennsylvania. And I wanted to really focus in on a couple what I feel significant growing concerns with the governor's priorities. In his budget address, the governor actually asked the question, why aren't Republicans clapping when he's talking about, what his proposals are with agriculture? And I think because we're extremely concerned. I'd like to first talk a little bit about the massive expansion of the ag innovation grants. The representative from Fayette County had talked about it. This is its second year of existence, and it's now the fourth largest line item in your budget. And to me, it's, very questionable. It looks to be a program that's picking winners and losers. Specifically, when we look at 15 or $10 million went to maybe 88 awards, less than 100 awards for the whole state of Pennsylvania. $10 million is massive in the world of agriculture for the state's largest industry. Less than 100 awards. How is that celebrated in your eyes?
How is the innovation fund or the allocation?
Yes.
I'm just very curious. I mean, you're talking
Sure.
about individual projects, or you're talking about the fund itself?
Well, I completely agree because it's questions on both. Because if we look at and just dig down a little bit deeper, I mean, I don't know the examples of all of these, but Westmoreland County received 3 awards and these awards were for farms and food processors. But Westmoreland County, so 3 entities received awards. I don't know what those dollar amounts are, and good for them. But last census, we have 1,100 farms, down 1,400 farms from the census before, and the governor is celebrating a program that helps 3.
Well, we're celebrating a program that invests in 88, right? So important that every one of those farms and businesses that were awarded something applied for something.
Yes, and it's great because 88 businesses were benefited. Washington County won award for a county that has 1,700 farms. One award in the county. And so, like, I respectfully request the direction that we're going when now the 4th largest line item is going to maybe help 100 more farms. You know, we have 49,000 farms in Pennsylvania, and we're celebrating the assistance in 100 farms and processors. And my concern is, at the same time, the governor cut almost 20% in the centers of excellence. I mean, I'm a big beef guy. I'm a big producer guy. You know, when we look at the centers of excellence, that's beef, poultry, and livestock, dairy. I think plants might now be in there. And their entire budget for livestock producers is now less than $4 million. And we're giving $25 million of targeted, hand-selected. It looks to me like, I mean, we really have to look at this ag innovation because it's not helping Pennsylvania farmers. It seems to be helping 100 hand-selected farmers.
You know, again, I mean, I would just say that, so I'm from Adams County, right? So I use this as an illustration. The Nouse Foods Cooperative is made up of 125 growers. So Nouse Foods, you know, receives a grant in the Innovation Fund. So that's 125 of their members who are benefiting. But the cooperative was the applicant. You know, the rice packing in Adams County packs for every one of the growers in Adams County and beyond.
And respectfully, I mean, a lot of love for ag, and we work together, and I look forward to working together. But when we cut existing, proven, successful programs that have oversight, that have transparency by 20%, you know, which is a big, last week the Pennsylvania cattlemen met, you know, and that's an $800,000, that's a significant assault on Pennsylvania cattlemen by this administration, and they're celebrating. It just seems to me that our priorities for the second year of a program may be headed in 2 different directions. I want to help all agriculture, and it appears this administration maybe is just looking to help a hand-select few.
Well, I disagree, because we have worked our tail off to try to help the producers. It's the ACAP funds we were talking about. It's the Farm Bill, and the only one in the nation. It's $25 million into innovation. It's $60 million in the High Path AI Fund. I mean, over and over and over. I mean, all of those things are investments in Pennsylvania agriculture. They're not investments anywhere else. So the administration he's put us right at the very center of an economic development strategy along with technology and innovation. So agriculture is part and parcel to the future of this state. And we're building that inside of this budget. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Representative Young.
Good afternoon, Mr. Secretary and team. Personally, I want to say thank you so much. I have seen the amazing outputs of work that you have put into the Commonwealth, and specifically speaking from my perspective in Philadelphia and Delaware counties. One of the reasons why I got into this role is because I wanted to see how government can really have a direct impact on people, and I have seen throughout the different entities that I know I engage, there has been not one Bartram's Garden, not one FDR Park, not one entity in my space that have said that they were not accessible to you. And so I want to say thank you, because the people in my community have a better understanding, a greater appreciation for how farm to table really impacts their daily lives. And so with that being said, I want to also emphasize the types of grants that have now been afforded to such communities. We can real time see the evidence of how it can bring a whole new awareness to a group of people, mainly students, who probably in years before didn't know that this opportunity was possible. So thank you. My question is, I wanted to know, does your department utilize a census data track related to agriculture in order to steer funding and support towards the different communities, not only in urban communities, but across the entire Commonwealth?
We do. We use that. We really rely upon the USDA census data, particularly because it gives us a picture of what is ag and where is ag, but also points us to who is that, right, and where are those communities in Pennsylvania that we need to reach.
All right, thank you for that. That's my only question. I do want to say also, if there's any other way that we can add education, advocacy, and making more people aware of the greatness that your department can offer to everybody in this Commonwealth, please don't hesitate to utilize my office. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank the gentlelady. Representative Alstemer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for being here today with your team. Appreciate all your testimony. So I come from the 139th District, and in Wayne and Pike County, our farmers, they help feed our local communities up there. They help feed our families. They help feed our Commonwealth and beyond. Our farmers in Wayne and Pike County also face serious financial burdens, additional regulations, and the small farms lack infrastructure and technical assistance. To that point, Mr. Secretary, Pennsylvania must meet its Chesapeake Bay goals by 2025 as required by the EPA. Despite current efforts and new initiatives such as the Agricultural Conservation Assistance Program, ACAP, Pennsylvania's third watershed implementation plan was rejected by the EPA in November of 2022. Do you anticipate additional regulatory controls and nutrient reductions placed on our Pennsylvania agricultural industry?
So we have, and Representative, thank you, it's a great question. We have a Beyond 2025 document that's been entered into with the EPA that sets forth the work left to do that was established in the Watershed Implementation Plan 3 that you've noted. There's work to do there yet. So I don't anticipate new, but I do anticipate sort of having to basically finish what we started. And that's where the ACAP fund fits. It's where some of the federal funding that we've been blessed to receive here fits. And I'll just note that we have the best scorecard from the Chesapeake Bay in nearly 20 years, getting a B plus in the upper reaches of the Bay. So progress being made, but we're hopeful, just to say that we can continue that momentum and that pace, but not anticipating new requirements.
Okay, that's good news. What are you doing to protect farmers from further regulations or controls on Pennsylvania agriculture, especially with the threat of lawsuits from neighboring Bay states or punitive sanctions from the EPA?
Well, I am hopeful that it's a new day with a new administration. We are hopeful that they recognize the really important relationship that the EPA and the USDA has with the state of Pennsylvania and our farmers. The lawsuit piece, as I've said many times, is an irritant just because it has, completely void of recognizing the value of our farms and the work that we're doing and the progress we've made. Where we need them to help us is on investment. This is a time conversation. You simply have so many seasons to make the changes, so we need them to accommodate on time. We need the technical assistance provided through the USDA and the EPA and the work that we're doing at ACAP. And we need continued funding for our own work through the State Conservation Commission, and then celebrate that work in the accomplishments of Pennsylvania agriculture.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Secretary. Mr. Chairman, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank the gentleman. Representative Curry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Secretary Redding, for being here with your team today. As Rep. Young mentioned, just appreciate the programming that you are continuing to put your focus on, particularly in our communities where food insecurities are come at high rates. Earlier, we had a conversation with the Office of the Attorney General's office about SNAP and how funds are being fraudulently siphoned out of people's accounts. And so because of that, we definitely are depending on our food banks that carry a lot of weight in terms of what they're able to provide and what is on their shelves. So thank you for continuing to advocate for that funding that definitely helps to directly impact districts like mine in Delaware County and throughout the Commonwealth. The question I have for you today is how, as the co-chair of the Black Maternal Health Caucus, and I talk about maternal health all the time, so this is no different today, how can programs like the state food purchase program help pregnant and postpartum moms? Food insecurity during this vulnerable time is a real challenge for many women on the birthing journey, and we know that proper food nutrition can lead to better health outcomes for moms and babies. How can agriculture work with other agencies like Health and Human Services? We know Phil Abundance, I'm going to give them a shout out. They do great work with their pilot programs around moms, and the SHARE program. How can you help to address and partner with these agencies, especially during and after pregnancy?
Yeah, Representative, thank you. It's always a great question. I appreciate your shout out to both the Phil Abundance folks, but also the importance of women and women's health. And I think everything that we do is, to your point about sort of the partnership, working with DHS and working with our partners at Department of Health through our WIC and Farmers Market Nutrition Program. I think we've talked about different aspects, farmers markets, the WIC farmers markets, making sure that we've got food in that food bank, making sure that we're being creative in our own sort of programming with the infrastructure and capacity and access. We are excited about the Section 1115 waiver. I think that's a great opportunity for us to connect food and food as medicine to all of the folks who need it. So there's multiple touch points, and I would say that it's not a singled out item necessarily, but it touches the folks that you note here of importance. We want them to have access to food and available food in the food banks. And
I appreciate that. And to that point, food is definitely medicine. We know that with the proper nutrition, helping folks to understand, even before they get pregnant or enter that journey, that, cutting back on different types of foods or, having foods that they're accessible for their health, that medicine will help to cut down the comorbidities that oftentimes definitely and directly impact the mortality rates that we're seeing so high in this Commonwealth. So I appreciate the work that you're doing. We'll continue to love to partner with you throughout the Commonwealth. And food is very important to the healthy lifestyles of moms and babies. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's part of a functioning society, right? To have access to food and healthy food. So our Fresh Food Financing Initiative was really geared with that particular view. Is like there's a lot of folks who know what they need, but they don't have access to what they need. So building that capacity in these communities, whether it's the corner store or the grocery store and rural and urban areas alike, is really critical. We're anxious to make those announcements soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Redding.
Thank you.
Thank the gentlelady. Representative DeVanzo.
Thank you, Chairman Harrison, and thank you, Secretary Redding, for being here today. I want to talk about the governor's budget proposal, and one of his funding proposals was the legalization of adult use cannabis. Excuse me. It is proposed by the Department of Agriculture would regulate the adult use cannabis industry in Pennsylvania and receive $40 million. $15 million to cover the oversight and operations, and $25 million for a revolving loan credit. I believe it was discussed last year that this isn't something that you requested, right? You really didn't request that the Department of Agriculture would oversee this. Is that correct?
So from where we were last year to this year is sort of unrecognizable, I'll just say. And I think there's a couple of things that stood out. One is I do believe, as I said last year, that there's an economic opportunity for the ag community. We've heard themes of that today about how do we protect it and enhance it. I think this is a really important difference between what the other 24 states are proposing and what Pennsylvania's proposing. We'll be the only state that will be administered by a state Department of Agriculture. Okay. Two, it's the only state that has prioritized in the permitting the opportunity for farmers to actually have a permit to grow. So while we have folks who are interested in industrial hemp, there's going to be folks who are interested in adult use. And when you can produce a crop that's got a margin compared to where a lot of the crops are today, it's a good thing. All right. When the funding amounts were proposed for the operations, revolving loan credit, was any of this proposed by you, or this was strictly from the governor's office? Proposed by me. Oh, okay. Okay, cool. And the reason, one of the things that I think it's interesting is because last week we had Pennsylvania State Police out here, and they had no involvement in this whatsoever. So we had a 120-degree or 180-degree switch here. Were any of the stakeholders involved to solicit input in the agriculture community to see if the farmers, one, would want to grow the adult cannabis, which is federally listed as a Section 1 narcotic, and would still have limited marketability for farmers? Yeah, so we have not gone out and solicited comment from stakeholders on this. We do have a really good sense from the industrial hemp program that we've hit a high water mark of 580 growers at one point in the last couple of years. There are 377 tobacco growers in Pennsylvania who grow 7,000 acres of tobacco. I'm going to guess that some of those folks are going to be interested in participating, but I don't know the exact number, nor have we gone out to the stakeholders to ask them. Okay, okay. And one of my last questions here is if farmers aren't interested in growing, they're applying for this program, would existing medical marijuana growing operations be eligible under the program instead? I'm sorry, what was the last part? If the farmers aren't interested in growing the recreational marijuana, would medical marijuana growing operations be eligible? So they, again, the way this is set up, that everybody who's a current sort of permit grower in the medical marijuana program will be able to participate if they choose in the adult use program. That's, as you note in the budget, those fees are part of that transition. Second in position is the farmer. So it's not an either or. They're both going to be afforded the opportunity to grow. All right. Appreciate it. Thank you, sir.
Thank the gentleman. Representative Friel.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Secretary, for being here. I'm pretty sure if I asked you to guess what I'm going to ask about, you'd be able to do it. I'm very interested, obviously preserving farms and farmers, it's one of the most critical jobs that we do here, and it's, the largest part of our economy. So when things that come into Pennsylvania that have potential negative impacts, if we don't manage them correctly, it's a reason for concern. And so I'm going to ask a little bit about FPRs, or residual food processing waste, and its importation into Pennsylvania and its potential, potential positive uses and potential harm it can do if we don't put the guardrails up to manage these waste streams.
Yeah, I think our very first meeting when we met was on FPRs, right? And you had a sort of a county, almost neighbor-specific, and it's grown from there. And I just want to acknowledge the conversation that we've had, and certainly House Bill 586 and 87. There's no question that we can do better, right? And we've got a higher standard in Pennsylvania for manure than we do for FPRs, food processing residual. That's wrong, right? We're better than that. We really need to raise the bar, which we're proposing to do. Right, so you're going to have both a differentiation of what is an FPR and how to manage it. You've got odor issues. You're going to raise the reporting requirements and credentials for folks who are applying it. So all of that is what we do already in the manure side. So we think that's a really important part. Those products are important to agriculture. We allow them. It's part of the right to farm, but we have to know the nutritive value of them. So that's a bonus. That's a plus. I think the challenge that we've had, and you brought this to light, is that we've got stuff moving into Pennsylvania that we're not aware of, right? There's not a reporting requirement to us to know how many trucks come from Virginia, as an example. So I think that's the piece where if there's an uncertainty, it's like, what is the volume, right? We know what we do in Pennsylvania, but we don't know what comes into the state. So that would be my thought. I mean, Greg and you.
No, and I appreciate that, and I appreciate the support on those bills. And I think, food processing waste, as you said, if we have to know what it is, because we don't know what farmers are putting onto the land, and I think we want to protect our farms and farmers. It also can be used, and I'm going to shift a little bit towards digesters, because part of what we can do in helping the operating costs of farms and providing farmers an opportunity to build a new revenue stream, but also manage costs, also needs some guardrails. But we've seen some digesters come in and do really well on farms. We also see some large, biogas, industrial producers that are trying to site digesters on farms that maybe that's not the most appropriate place. Can you just talk about the digester programs and how they can help farms, and what do we have to be careful for so we don't, some of the loopholes, let's say, that we don't have big industrial companies coming on and becoming farms?
Yeah, it's a great question, and one that, quite frankly, is complicated because what we've realized is the cost of the digester is the limiting factor for doing it. So you're anywhere from 7 to 10 million or beyond to build these digesters. So that's not what most farms have. We're not good at financing them. We really don't have a mechanism inside of either the financing component and or our conservation efforts. We have some opportunity there to change that, but at least in the short run, we need to incentivize somehow. So we're pleased with the governor's energy. The lightning proposal, I think, is part of it. We've done innovation grants. We've done 8 digesters there. We've got 1, it's a planning grant. So listen, I think we don't have enough digesters. We have opportunity to do community digesters. That was the point of the Innovation Fund, to put a $2 million mark to incentivize that. But we need more digesters. They're beneficial, obviously, to FPR because they break down a lot of the nutrients, but also break down the odors. But they're really important economic engines to those particular farms in the neighborhood. So I just think we need to be sensitive to that. I think if we need to look at the public-private partnerships and how you finance them. We've had multiple folks inquire. The issue always becomes a finance question. And how do you finance it? So a long answer to say you need them. How do you finance them? If the only way to get what you need is through some creative financing and a partnership in the private sector, that's what happens.
Well, thank you very much. I see the lights going on for my hook, so I appreciate your time today. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank the gentleman. Representative Barton.
Thank you, Chairman Harris, and welcome, Secretary Redding, Deputy Secretary, welcome. And I serve on the agricultural-rich Schuylkill and Berks counties, and have the utmost respect and support for our ag industry and our farmers. And I thank you for all the work and support that you've given our 124th district. And
you're welcome.
Thank you. And likewise, our farmers are good stewards of the land. I was elected to be good stewards of taxpayer money. So with that said, there was a performance audit report released in February 13th of this year by Auditor General DeFore regarding the handling of grants by Department of Conservation and Natural Resources through its Community Conservation Partnership Program. Were you aware of that, or did you happen to see that?
I knew of it. Maybe Greg has studied.
I read it, yeah.
Okay, and I'll share with you. The report highlighted that DCNR ignored policies when awarding grants. They did not award all the grants competitively, and used its own discretion when awarding grants, despite saying it was transparent and competitive process. Now, Secretary Reding, does it make sense then to welcome the Auditor General to review the handling of your new Innovation Development Grant Program in a similar fashion that DCNR was handled?
Listen, there is nothing to hide. If somebody wants to take the time to go through that and look at it and look at the match requirements and check that against what we set out as the requirements for eligibility, they're certainly welcome to do that. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for the transparency and the direct answer as well. And you awarded over $10 million in such a short period of time, $10 million, sorry, with no oversight or input from this General Assembly. And now you're requesting an additional $13 million to be added to the discretionary program. Can you share with me how you would justify such a significant budget increase without any kind of transparency of the process or input in the decisions being made?
I feel like I've taken so many calls from members about grants and eligibility and putting in encouraging words and written letters, right, received letters. So I feel like there's a lot of transparency about what comes to us. And I come to the body here every year to sort of express sort of what we do and how we do it. So I feel like there's like we haven't had enough advice and counsel. I have 67 boards and commissions in the department that oversee things that we do. So no hesitation in sharing that or looking at what we do. But I'd hope that there's an appreciation for and a trust that what we do and how we provide that and present that to you with what's on the website and the conversations and the transparency, that you appreciate that we try to look at all of the guidelines that we publish, hold ourselves to that high standard, and make the decisions against what we have publicly stated as the eligibility requirements. And then we present that to you.
And as I prefaced my comments, well, I appreciate all that work. I genuinely do. And but it's still, we need to be good stewards and constantly make sure that we're being transparent as it relates to that. Can you share with me why the governor's more interested in spending money on grant programs for your department and shifting it from priority ag preparedness or response funding?
Well, again, I think the governor would say it's an and not an or, right?
Sorry, it's a what?
It's an and, right? So there's things that we're getting. And to understand that this is a trade inside the Department of Agriculture, right? We didn't trade away something to another agency or expect another agency to give us something. We did this very intentionally to recognize that we had an overwhelming request for innovation funds. And really amazing projects, could not support them all. And the innovation is a direct reflection of what is happening in the labor market. So a lot of these projects are about labor efficiencies, right? Competitive footing, all of the things that we talk about being important to agriculture. At the same time, we are not harming the reserve we have for the high-path avian influenza. Right, I feel like there's a tension between the two. If we hadn't built the reserve fund, if we didn't try for 3 years with Governor Wolf and Governor Shapiro twice to build that, we were trading that away, that's a different conversation. So I feel like it's an and, right? You're getting both here, protection in the high path and the investment in innovation.
Thank you, Secretary Reding. And my light is up, so Chairman, that ends my questioning. Thank you very much.
Thank the gentleman. Representative Webster.
Thank you, Chairman. And, Secretary Reding, welcome. Thank you for being here today. I'm heading in a little bit different direction, but it seems like our world is getting a little warmer in Pennsylvania. I've seen articles that said tropical species, literally tropical species, are moving north. So as we face some of this, can you talk a little bit about what farmers are doing, what PA is doing to help agriculture plan for a climate that might be warmer? And I think it's February and we're already 2 inches low on our average rainfall. How that impacts production.
Yeah, Representative, thank you. And I think the piece around climate sort of always intrigues me, just because there's not an industry that has a more intimate relationship with the climate than the farmer.
Yeah.
Right. So what happens to it is really critical, and making sure that we're thinking about how do we build that resiliency into our production system. So it goes back to the concept. That's really about a conservation conversation, right? It's cover crops. It's the good things that we've done for the purpose of Chesapeake Bay and otherwise, that have really been the hallmark of how you build the resiliency against a changing climate. The flip side is we also continue to see issues around invasive species, right? The Center for Rural PA did a study a couple of years ago, and we're $100 million cost to invasive species. There's a positive side in that we are now growing varieties of apples, as an example, in Adams County that 20 years ago were in Virginia. So I look at all of this as sort of a complicated piece, but the point you're making is that we're aware of it, we're thinking about it, we invest in it, we plan for it. And that's where I think we've tried to be as a department administration on the climate with a lot of really, really important investments.
Yeah. Can you speak sort of generally, if I'm a private farmer, am I being alerted so that I can also plan like for those changes?
Yes, there's a lot of discussion, and certainly in the previous administration, a lot of investments made in Pennsylvania. We're part of 27, I think, different commodity projects from the previous administration that are now sort of under review, as you've heard. But there's a lot of investments that were made. Again, they come back to what we do, just basic conservation practices, but the farmer's engaged in that.
All right, well, thank you. Just real quick in a different direction, a lot of times veterans come home to Pennsylvania, they want to live in a rural area and sort of put their heads down and get their hands in the dirt. How are we doing with veterans and farming in Pennsylvania?
Amazing. Pennsylvania, fourth largest veteran state in the nation, 8,000 in the last census, farmers who are veterans. They're there. We support them through 2 different grant programs, through our Farm Bill. Amazing people. All of those skills they've learned in the military are transferable. Well,
appreciate that. If there's something we should be doing for veterans in this legislature, I'd be glad to help that along.
Good.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank the gentleman. Representative Eckert.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good to see you, Secretary Redding, from the first of 2 Adams County guys today to ask you questions. But it's always a pleasure to have you here and your staff. Gonna go try to hit 2 things here quick. As you know, you've got some questions from my colleagues here. I've been on the committee for a little while. I've been here for a little while on ag issues. I've been supportive of the Farm Bill. I've been supportive of the Ag Innovation Program. I think some of the angst that you're hearing from our colleagues is just transparency and oversight, right? Yep. And trying to understand how these things are being determined. So in that vein, who makes the decision? Let's look at the innovation grant, right? Who makes those decisions within your department? Is it a team? How does that work internally?
Yeah, so important. Thank you for the question, right? So I think there are 2 pieces to this. One is that the innovation program is under the State Conservation Commission, right? So you've got a commission. Inside of that, there's a director of conservation innovation who sort of is the principal, pulls in other members. I mean, so they could be members from Center of Excellence, they could be in the Bureau of Markets, it could be Animal Health. It's a team, internal team, pretty broad in scope, but that's the team. It's a team review. It's not an individual, it's not a secretary either. So
are those folks all part of the department, or do you bring in stakeholder groups and different groups? You know, who is in part of that? Again, look at the Ag Innovation Program. When you're looking at the application list, who is sitting in that room and saying, okay, this is why we're going to give $40,000 to XYZ?
Yeah, that's the Department of Agriculture.
Okay. Do you have conversations with stakeholder groups on certain programs and whether it's a good investment, or how does that work?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know to what extent we've engaged individual sort of sectors, but it's not an active conversation about, hey, take a look at this application. They're confidential, number 1. 2, we try to make sure that we get a lot of different eyes on it from the department, and not a single person or a single bureau. So that's been the approach we've taken with innovation as well as the Farm Bill.
Yeah, and I know that there's other grant programs out there in different agencies that do something similar, and I think my colleague from Schuylkill County was talking about how DCNR was the subject of an Auditor General's report, and I think, again, I appreciate the programs. I think they're good for Pennsylvania. Our goal here is to make sure that these monies are going to programs that are the most qualified, and again, it's just in the spirit of, I think, government transparency. So I appreciate that. I'm going to transition real quick back to adult use cannabis. I'm curious, are you familiar with any other states that have legalized marijuana that have used the Department of Agriculture for these programs?
No.
So, and that's like places like California, again, where agriculture is huge. It's a huge industry. And so why is your agency, you think, tasked to handle this? Especially given, I'm just using California as the example, obviously has a huge agricultural industry. Why is the Department of Ag, you think, tasked with handling this?
There's a couple things. One, I would just say that Vermont, by the way, does do things for ag and around their ag community, but it's not administered out of ag. I thought a lot about this. I mean, I think, the Department of Agriculture, we're in and out of 47,000, food establishments, 7,300 greenhouses and nurseries. I mean, we're talking about plants, we're talking about a commodity. This is a regulatory structure. It's really, at the end of the day, it's a commodity and how we manage the commodity. I think this is what we've done. Our roots are in roots, right? So I really feel like we can do this with all the confidence, in partnership, the Department of Health and the medical marijuana program. So I take it as a vote of confidence. I think it's an opportunity. I think it's a differentiator for Pennsylvania that the Department of Agriculture and our reach and consumer protection, at the same time being very, very clear that it's not only about administration being at the department, within the department, but it's opportunity for those farms and the farm community inside the structure is an important part.
Yeah, well, I appreciate your time, and before I go, I just want to acknowledge that it's always great that we live close, and that your wife is always here to support you in these hearings. I see Nina back there, so it's nice that she comes and lets you get beat up for a couple hours here. Right. So it's always a pleasure. Thanks, Secretary Redding. Yep.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank the gentleman, Representative Kincaid.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for being here, Secretary. I think, like Representative Friel, you can probably guess what I'm going to ask you about. As I'm sure that you know, and following up on my colleague, Representative Fleming's question, food insecurity is worse now than it was during the pandemic. It's worse now than it has been in really modern history. And we flat funded SFPP and PASS in the last budget. This budget, the proposal is to increase it by $4 million per program. That doesn't actually reach to what the request was from our charitable food network in order to meet adequacy. And really, we're not even really meeting adequacy with the number that they're asking for. Their number is conservative in terms of what is necessary just to meet the needs right now. As prices are increasing, as we're facing issues with avian flu and that driving up the cost of eggs and other basics, why is the proposal $4 million per program and not enough to actually meet just the conservative adequacy number of the charitable food network?
Yeah, Representative, thank you, and I did anticipate your question. Again, thank you, but you're consistent and a great advocate for food and food security, so thank you for that. When we put the budget together, we're looking at what the needs were, and clearly the Emergency Food Advisory Committee came in with higher numbers, but we felt like this was the year we really had to speak to the State Food Purchase Program increase, that base funding. Really was important. And then you can sort of build around that with PASS. You can build around it with the other, support that comes from, TFAP funding and through USDA. There's other ways to sort of meet that. So we felt like this was the start of a conversation about what the needs are. Wanted to make sure that we were being reflective of what we were hearing and seeing, but clearly anticipate, just given what's happening, both in terms of need and potential changes on the federal side, there's going to be a need for more resources, right? What are they and where do you direct them? I think that's part of this conversation we're having today, but we have to think about where is that best applied inside of our food delivery system.
Thank you. Yeah, with the movement of a budget at the federal level that seeks to cut $230 billion from SNAP, where 43% of kids or 43% of recipients on SNAP are children, I think that it's time for the state to step up so that we can actually address those issues, and we need to be a little bit more aggressive about it. On the other side of things, and especially as we talk about avian flu, we, in our previous budget cycle, failed to give what we traditionally give to the Penn Vet, and when it comes to state support. Obviously, that's not specifically agriculture or the Department of Agriculture, but I'm wondering if you can speak to the need for more veterinarians and the current situation when it comes to veterinarians, especially as it relates to our agriculture industry.
Yeah, it's a great question. Thank you. And I'm hopeful that the veterinary training and services grant line gives us some flexibility that we've never had, right? So not to compromise sort of the core needs of diagnostics and research and clinical and the academic components for veterinary sort of cultivation, but you also have to address placement, right? Availability and placement. So we look at the grant program as an opportunity to look at these hard-to-serve areas. We've relied on the USDA, the National Food NIFA Foundation to sort of do that. There's sort of a point now where I think we have to look at those hard-to-serve populations and areas. That's improved, I'll just say, with the Western Lab in Beaver County. But we really need to focus on how do you help these veterinarians get into a community, get established, which is something we've never really focused on, and whether that's through tuition assistance or business assistance. So I'm hopeful that that line allows us to do that, but there's still the shortage. It's not going to be solved simply by more money. It's going to be how do we incentivize and support veterinarians into these areas that need the vets, obviously, but also need the assistance.
Because we are sort of hemorrhaging veterinarians in the agriculture industry, large animal veterinarians. Would that be accurate to say?
Yeah, that's accurate. I think there's economics that run against us here, right? So you've got to look at like these very rural areas. They're driving a lot to do that. The rates are difficult. You don't have the density of agriculture we have in some other parts of the state. So sometimes really tough to convince somebody to go to these rural areas. But for those reasons, plus other just basic economics, folks are stepping away, but we need to attract them back.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank the gentlelady, Representative Marcel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for joining us today. I wanted to actually talk a little bit more about veterinary programs. So essentially, I wanted to see if you could explain how the new veterinary training and services grants program will be operated by your department. I saw that it's proposed to have $33 million for grants to support veterinary activities and animal-related services, thereby eliminating direct payments to one of our state-relateds, University of Pennsylvania. So could you just elaborate on that?
Yeah, so thank you. Again, I think this is certainly a change from where we've been in the past. I think it's fair to say what we saw in 23-24 when the University of Pennsylvania was not funded, vet school was not funded, just the fragility of the system and how at risk we really were. And credit to them, I mean, they continued to do the service and provide all of the things that we needed as a Commonwealth, but didn't get compensated for it. Coupled with, I think, the previous question about, we know we've got some challenges in parts of Pennsylvania to attract veterinarians, and the appropriation to a single institution doesn't give you the flexibility to really look at what those needs are, and then how do you address the needs. So in this case, we're looking for sort of education and teaching components. There's going to be clinical services, diagnostic testing, and innovative research, and some other considerations about how to address those underserved areas of Pennsylvania that need a large animal veterinarian. We think the grant program is a way to do that.
Thank you for that. And so would this work like a defined grant program for the service and research project activities, allowing direct payments? How would it be set up?
Yeah, no, thank you. Right, so it's a good point. So our plan is to use the procurement process, right? So we would put out sort of a statement of what those needs are, and accept,
So you would put criteria out
yeah, it'll be criteria.
and
Yep.
then allow people to apply for it?
That's correct.
So you'll be soliciting applicants, or will you be making it more like a rolling grant project, kind of?
Rolling grant?
Like rolling grants, or is it just like a kind of one-time solicitation?
Yeah, I don't know whether, we're going to use the procurement code to get it done. And then the question is whether you need to have some additional flexibility on that sort of fifth piece that I've mentioned about how to serve those difficult areas that need a veterinarian, and how do you set up those. I don't know how that's going to be work. Greg, any thoughts?
Yeah.
Well, and if you could also just add, when you're answering, will this be something that is very transparent and accountable? I know there's been like a theme of trying to make sure that there's a lot of taxpayer transparency, and so I know you're still figuring out, kind of how you're going to do it, but if you could actually answer that too, I would appreciate it.
Yeah, it's going to be done by the procurement code, right? So whatever we do under the state's procurement process, that's the, you'll have access to whatever we have that comes in through that procurement process.
Did you have anything to add, sir? I'm sorry, I apologize that I cut
was
you off.
just going to add to that. So as far as under that procurement guidelines for grants, you do them in 2-year increments, good for 2 years.
And could you speak into the microphone a little bit closer? Thank you.
Yeah, we'll follow the procurement code when it comes to the grants if we do an RFA or an RFP.
Okay. Well, I look forward to learning more about how this program is going to actually be put together, because I think it's important to have that transparency and accountability, and I certainly don't want the veterinary program at the University of Pennsylvania to be held up by some of the state-related votes and things like that that has happened, but we do still need that transparency and accountability, and so I'm happy to hear that will be incorporated into what your program setup is.
Absolutely, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank the gentlelady. Representative Salisbury.
My question today deals with food safety. So some other commenters today have spoken about the avian flu, but I also have had a number of constituents talking to me wondering what Pennsylvania will be doing to ensure food safety, because we certainly saw recently high-level FDA resignation coming from Jim Jones, who is the Deputy Commissioner for Human Foods at the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, and layoffs of 89 staffers in charge of doing food inspections. But even before then, I was looking at a Gallup poll from last summer, 2024, talking about how consumer confidence in the safety of food is at an all-time low. So obviously this is an issue that has spanned multiple administrations. What are we doing, and what can we do at a Pennsylvania level to make sure that our residents feel confident when they see Listeria, E. coli, Salmonella, bird flu, all of these things in the news?
Yeah, thank you. It's a great question. So I think certainly in this time of transition, we see a lot of changes, but just know that sort of our values haven't changed. Our work and focus around food safety, we're pleased to have 133 folks who are working in the Bureau of Food Safety, right? So they're doing the 47,000 food facilities and retail food establishments, and I can give you the long list, but just know that we're in there. And we're doing that under a unified food code, right? So there's a set standard regardless of where those restaurants and food establishments are in the state. And they're checking every day, right? And their inspection reports are put online. The second part of that is we do a lot of work in cooperation and partnership with the FDA. Until someone says otherwise, we're assuming that those relationships stand. And we'll continue to do both the manufactured food inspections as well as the Food Safety Modernization Act. So to your constituents, I just convey feel very comfortable with what we're doing, that the Department of Agriculture is there. It's not just a federal government partner who's doing that. This is really based out of the state laws of Pennsylvania that give us that confidence.
I've been talking to people both on social media and in person in my district who are looking at starting gardens for the first time this year. We've certainly talked a little bit about manure management today, because we know that runoff can cause disease in vegetables that people often eat raw. I wonder, Pennsylvania has such a huge agriculture industry, and it's such an economic driver. Are we concerned about other states, other countries being concerned about buying our products, just based on what can we do to bolster people's confidence that Pennsylvania food is safe and will not harm them, and they are going to be able to eat nutritious and healthy foods?
Yeah, it's, again, a really great point. I think there's a couple of things. I think you're talking about what is our role at the state level in terms of oversight and inspections, and I'm guessing most folks don't make that direct connection between sort of what we do as a department and how that's sort of what it is we do and how it's done. I think there's a really high level of transparency by posting those inspection reports. Two, you're trying to raise the bar, and I think the PA Preferred program is a great example of that, where you put that good housekeeping seal of approval on product. I mean, that's an important statement about value and quality. I think the work that's done through the quality assurance programs, as mentioned earlier, whether it's the beef quality or the dairy, right, the poultry, it's that they're really important farm level checks and balances, quality control measures, if you will. So I think that's part of it. Greg?
Yeah, and don't forget about all the county health departments as well. There's 7 county health departments and 107 local health departments in the state that help with that burden of ensuring food is safe.
Yeah, I'm Jewish, so I've had people come to me and they say, is it safer to buy kosher because that has a different inspection? So I think people are just very confused. They want to make sure that they can buy fresh fruits and vegetables in particular. I think there's a lot of concern about that. Lunch meats, meat in general, of course, eggs. So I think anything that we can do to communicate to the public what is being done to kind of bolster some of that consumer confidence would be probably not just appreciated by farmers, but consumers who are fretful about what to purchase for their families.
It's a great point. Thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Mostello.
Thank you, Chairman Harris, and welcome again. Secretary Redding, always good to be with you. You had touched on this earlier. You had mentioned it to another representative about a county-based digester pilot program that you had mentioned. There's a $2 million line on it, or, sectioned off pot of money for this. And I just have some questions about that, just kind of what the reasoning is behind this pilot program. I heard you say there is a need for it, but really what's the reason behind it? What's your vision for it? And also, when you call it a county-based digester pilot program, how many counties did you contact? Did counties contact you? Did all 67? I got a lot of questions, so yeah. I guess I'll let you start and then I'll just keep going on.
No, it's a great question, Representative. Thank you.
Yeah, so just a deeper dive into this program, this pilot program you want to start.
Yeah, it's a reflection of two things. One, the number of digester proposals and requests that we had in the first round of the Ag Innovation Fund. Two, we saw a need to really address sort of a community-based digester versus an individual farm or business digester. So Blair County, as an example, is looking at a community digester. Lancaster County, there are some counties that are looking. I say county, it could be multi, but at least at this point, they're regional-based versus county-based, right? So think about being able to pull in manure from multiple farms into one digester. And that was part of the innovation conversation. It's an energy conversation. It's part of the FBR conversation. But there's a lot of innovative ideas about how do you manage one of those, how do you finance them, how do you connect to the power grids. So that was the regional aspect.
So you have 2 locations already in mind, and how?
Well, they're not ours. I mean, they're just folks who've approached us.
So 2 counties so far out of this?
Yeah, that I'm aware of, and I don't want to pretend I know them all, but there are multiple, there's multiple county interest in this concept.
And, okay, and with that, is there like a competitive application process that where these are going to be located, all of that kind of?
So at this point, it's $2 million within the $25 million for the Ag Innovation Fund. So again, we'll have to sort of figure out how to structure that inside the Innovation Fund and what the the criteria are for that particular aspect of the Innovation Fund, but fully expect it's going to be different than the criteria that we've had for the first round, just given the unique nature of that particular aspect. So,
and how far along are you in the process of, well, just the 2 you mentioned with Blair and Lancaster right now?
Yeah, no. This is a concept borrowed from first round of innovation grants. and we thought it was really important to sort of acknowledge that there's a lot of digester interest in the Innovation Fund. Let's put a mark in there and talk about regional and community digesters.
Then when do you think you'll be maybe awarding some of this money for these for this program to either county?
Excuse me, so you think there'll be more?
No. When do you think you will be awarding the money? I'm sorry.
So it's a proposal, so pending, what the budget process is, but obviously post-budget, we would open that, open the round. But again, I would want to qualify to say that there's going to probably need to be some separate criteria for the $2 million energy project inside the Innovation Fund. That looks a little different than what we've done the past year just because of the unique nature of it.
Because you have to go through permitting and all that kind of fun stuff with where to put them, how to install, all of that kind of stuff,
Yeah,
right?
so an important distinction, we would anticipate receiving proposals to do such versus the department or the state leading those. I don't see us doing that at all. I think we're going to be a supporter and a champion for it, if you will, but we're not going to be choosing the areas. We're not going to be.
Who will be doing that then?
I think that's where you get these regional partners.
Yeah, and this is not a new concept. 2015, when we were working on Phase 3 WIP planning, part of that nutrient solution as far as a regional digester for smaller farmers to take advantage of all the benefits, that we talk about all the time with BMPs. It's been around. There's several companies that have approached the Secretary and I over the years just with their concepts, and I believe there's some small scale out there right now that they're working on. So this would be a benefit.
Yeah, I would add one other point. I said this earlier. I think it's important also for the State Conservation Commission.
Is the what?
It's the State Conservation Commission.
Okay.
Is sort of overseer of the Innovation Fund. So we would go to the commission, given the tie between conservation and energy, and get their guidance on how to do that.
How many do you think you'll have statewide? What do you anticipate?
I don't know. I don't even want to speculate because again, they're very, very expensive. So we only have
So
$2 million.
Won't go anywhere.
No, we have $2 million in the fund, so
Right.
you could put that all in one place potentially. So hopefully it's more than that, but I don't want to speculate a number.
Just the two. Okay. Thank you so much, Secretary.
Thank you.
Thank the gentlelady, Representative Kutz.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Secretary, always great to see you. Welcome back. Appreciate you being here. I want to start briefly to address some of the workforce issues as I represent Cumberland County, Cumberland Valley area, one of the largest FFA chapters in the entire Commonwealth. And so many kids who are looking for a career in agriculture. As we're seeing other careers take off with ag being such an important industry for us, what do you see as ways we can improve on ensuring future generations can continue to see farming and ag jobs as a sustainable way of life for a family-sustaining job, and to be able to encourage more of our students to want to pursue careers in agriculture?
It's a great question. Thank you. And you have a great, with Cumberland Valley, you've got one of the best. I'll say a couple of things. One is, and we've talked a lot about this, certainly it was sort of the vision of having the Commission on Ag Education Excellence, having it formed to bring both the Department of Education and Agriculture together, recognizing PDE has the statutory responsibilities and PDA has a lot of, championship, if you will, of the industry and stewardship of that. So putting us together was really a brilliant idea. And then continuing to build that out. So making sure that we look at how do you grow the programs you have, right? Make sure that we can inspire others to think about agriculture, and that takes a lot of different forms from supporting 4-H and FFA. It's why we do the farm show. It's why we're at the fairs. It's why we're every place talking about agriculture. But one, I think importantly, having it recognized inside the economic development strategy was a brilliant piece. Important to sort of note that it's part of our economic enterprise. But you also didn't have to support it by investments. So making sure that folks see themselves in the industry and that diversity, make sure that we support our 4-H and FFA programs, support ag education at large, and then just keep making investments in farm to school as we do with the Farm Bill.
Excellent. I appreciate that. Look forward to continuing to work with your department as we continue to try to grow that sector that's so important and crucial to Pennsylvania's economy, to ensure that we have the workforce to be able to replace it as more and more ag workers retire. If I can shift gears, I want to ask about the hardwoods research and promotion line item, and notably, which it provides for the operations of the Hardwoods Development Council and the 3 regional hardwoods utilization groups, which covers primarily the northern part of our Commonwealth. Mr. Secretary, I'm curious what you think, if anything, could be done to enable the southern portion of Pennsylvania to have a local hardwood utilization group to assist with market development, outreach, education, like those in the north.
They need it, right? I'll just say that the 33 counties that are not covered by a hardwood utilization group should be represented by the HUG. Every time I look at the map, when our Hardwoods Council gives me the map of where the #1 county is for jobs, right, hardwoods jobs, it's not in Elk and McKean, and it's in Lancaster County, right, because of the processing. So fully supportive. I think the HUGs are amazing in what they do, and they leverage a little bit of money from the state. And by the way, ended up with sort of 20% of innovation funds are going into the hardwood industry. So they're making these connects between innovation, jobs, and the stewardship of the environment.
Excellent. Appreciate that. Look forward to a continued conversation on that. And I look forward to welcoming back to Cumberland County for another farm tour, hopefully here soon. I want to thank you again, and Chairman, thank you for the time.
Right. Thank you.
Thank the gentleman. Chairman Eddie Day.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, thank you very much for being here, along with Greg and Fred and your whole staff. I just want to thank you and your staff, I mean this sincerely, for always being there. Anytime my staff and I have reached out, questions about so many different projects that we have going in ag, you've always been there and responded very quickly. Because of that, I think that it's really important that we share some of the thoughts that you have about our Pennsylvania Farm Bill. We are the only state in the country that has our own Farm Bill. And that Farm Bill has developed and grown and provides so many positive programs for Pennsylvania. I think it's important that we put this on record. So if you could just hit some of those highlights.
Yeah, I think it's a proud moment for us. They're differentiators both for Pennsylvania and our nation. They've set a standard. We've gone places in Pennsylvania we could never go before because of the Farm Bill, right? We know that those communities have every desire that we do to grow, to be engaged in food, need food access. So when you think about, to some of these questions about how do you inspire a new generation, that's the Ag and Youth Grant. Making sure that we're supportive of those direct farm and the meat processors, small meat program, farm to school and specialty crops and farm vitality grants, the urban agriculture and farm, just everywhere you look, there's a touch point on how we've grown and included and really developed agriculture as a result of the Farm Bill. I like to say often it's zip code neutral, right? Every place you go has got an ag story. Right? We want that story to be more than simply one of a food bank. We need them, but we need to have some creativity. You need investment. You need the schools. So that's what's inside the Farm Bill. And I think, a 7th year now being funded in this budget by the governor. So again, I want to thank you. And then there's all the related pieces that I think it's, the Farm Bill sort of acted like yeast, right? It's raised a lot of other money. Private investment, other state investment, local investments. Conservation is a great example of that. So thank you. Thanks for asking. Thanks for your support.
No, but thank you for your innovation. It's the blueprint for the future for Pennsylvania. And as you pointed out, because of that blueprint, we've also been able to acquire private industry to come to Pennsylvania and support us, as well as federal dollars, whether it's that Gus Schumacher program. How has that worked with our fruit and vegetables here in Pennsylvania? It's $12 million, I think, that comes. It started back in 2014. I think they've increased it since 2018. It's about $12 million that we can apply for through your efforts.
Yeah, so Gus Schumacher was a friend. He was the former Commissioner of Agriculture in Massachusetts, who died too early. He was an undersecretary at the USDA. So it's named after Gus. He was a champion of farmers market nutrition programs. So that's what the name, his title, is sort of his legacy. There is a federal piece of that, and there's a state piece of that. So there's federal funds, but we would need to also come up with the state money to leverage the federal dollars, right? But it's food bucks. It sort of works much like you do, in the farmers market nutrition program.
Great. And then, we've talked about promoting Pennsylvania, the Pennsylvania ag industry, and we have our PA preferred symbol, grown in PA, by PA, PA proud. We also now, because of the organic industry, which is now definitely growing, we now have a PA organic symbol, PA preferred organic symbol. Tell us a little bit how that's expanded as well.
Yeah, so we launched it during Farm Show. We're proud of that, as we've talked about, you and I, and collectively. It's not just good enough to know where, how it's produced. It's important to know where it's produced, right? So we put the where and the how together in the PA Preferred Organic. So you get the benefit of both brands, right? So we have legally filed, for the trademark on the PA Preferred Organic, actively recruiting members into the program, planning a consumer awareness campaign, and we have our first Painterland Sisters yogurt, are carrying that label on their packaging nationwide.
Terrific. That's going to conclude my questions, but I want to end with our promotion. PA preferred, grown in PA, by PA, PA proud. Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you.
We thank the chairman.
Thank you.
Chairman Mao.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, Mr. Deputy Secretary, it's so very good to see you again.
Likewise.
And I took notice that your very lovely and beautiful wife is in the audience today, so I had to rewrite my questions and really tame them down, so I don't want to feel the wrath of your wife.
So I'll say thank you to you and thank you, Nina, right? Is that right?
Okay. First, I want to say, in the interest of time, and I know what we have coming up next, I wanted to say we'll be submitting some written questions so that maybe you can give us some answers on different things. I don't have time to go through nearly all of them, so if you don't mind, we'll submit those then at a later date. I heard you say earlier that the committee to determine who gets grants and how much they are is all within the Department of Agriculture. And given the fact that that money is generated here, okay, I would think that it would be appropriate if you were to invite the 4 chairmen of the committees, the agriculture committees, House and Senate, to be part of that, I don't want to call it negotiation, but that deliberation as to who and how much. Would that be something that would be satisfactory to your?
Yeah, we should talk about that. I mean, I'm always sensitive to your time and your executive director's time of just, there's a lot of stuff to process, right? So all the files and stuff that comes, but we should talk about how to do that and to be inclusive in the process so you're comfortable with what we're doing.
Yeah, I mean, after all, we're the elected officials. Yeah. We are responsible. When people see something wrong, we're the ones they yell at. Yeah. And I'd like to give them your number, but I'm sure you get enough of that already. And the reason that I went down that road is that I have a list with me, and I'll just go through a few of them. I'm certainly not going to read them all, of some of the ones that I felt were, myself personally, questionable, okay? And I'll try not to mention names because I'm not here to target anybody, just the idea of where the money is going. And one of them I see is an energy company that you and I know both know very well that turns chicken manure into energy. But because of the cost of fertilizer over the past few years, over the past 10 years actually, has gone through the roof, chicken manure has become more valuable to sell than to turn into energy. Therefore, this company has not been able to make electricity with chicken manure in years. I'm trying to understand why we would give them a grant. And I'm not really looking for an answer on that right now. We can discuss that later. I'm just pointing out a few things. One that really caught my attention, And if this is for agriculture innovation, why would we give money to the Audubon Society, which they're about birds, not birds we eat? A training center for the development of urban agriculture. We don't have too many farms in the cities. And so basically, I think what we're talking about there is gardening. And it's okay, I have no problem with gardening, but we should be, in my opinion, we should be, if I was on the committee, I would be saying, let's gear our money towards something that can produce a lot of food on a little bit of land and help these guys with harvesting new innovations, but not gardens in the inner city. No. Nothing against that. Do it if you want, God bless you. But I just, I wouldn't have voted for that one. We're putting money towards $20,000 for consultation services to improve animal health. We have Penn State, we have Penn State Extensions, we have Penn Vet, and we have their own personal veterinarians. Why would we need to hire an outside consultant on animal health when we already put tons of money into the 4 things I just mentioned, which are at every farmer's fingertips in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania? And another one, and this will be the last one I mention, is we're putting money into a biodiesel project. And that's all well and good, but it's been tried year after year after year. A big company in our district where you and I live tried it years ago, and that company, I can say it's AgCom, you know that. They tried it, and they found out there's just no way to make money at it. So they gave up on the idea. But to put money there when we could be putting it into things that we eat, if I was on the committee, on that committee or commission, whatever you want to call it, that's the direction I would want to go. And therefore, I feel it's somewhat important for those of us that are the lawmakers to have a voice.
That's fair. And I think that without getting into the individual pieces, I think, as I alluded to earlier, part of the challenge is sort of the spectrum of what's innovation, right? And I don't know those particulars in each one of those, but trying to be mindful that if you're somewhere in the Amish or Plains Sect, what innovation looks like to you and where you apply that in your greenhouse may be different than what somebody is doing at the 1,000-cow dairy. But points well made.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time here today, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing me to ask a few questions today.
Thank the gentleman. Chairman Struzzi.
Thank you, Chairman Harris. Secretary Redding, thank you again for being here today. I have a couple of questions and some clarifications that I want to run through. First, I want to note, just for everyone who may be watching or listening, that the budget request from the governor is $255 million, roughly. But that's actually sort of misleading in a way, I guess, because there are a lot of funds that have been taken out of the ag budget request. And that's some of the concerns that I have, or some of the clarifications that I would like to understand. Particularly funding for fairs, which, as you know, fairs are big. The Indiana County Fair is one of my favorite weeks of the year. But it's taken $4 million out of the payments to fairs, and again, another $5 million out of the Animal Health and Diagnostic Commission funding, and it's going back to the Horse Racing Development Fund. Can you explain why that is occurring?
Yeah, so there's, as you know, there's 2 that we moved back. Over the years, they've moved different places. Now they moved back. So fairs and the Animal Health Diagnostic Commission. So there were two aspects. One, interestingly, the fair community felt more comfortable with the Racehorse Development Fund as a source of the money being more secure than the GGO. Okay. Right? So anyhow, that was one. 2 is, I think there's a connection sometimes missed between what we do in the animal health diagnostic labs and our equine industry. So we felt comfortable sort of putting that back as a recognition of both the value of the industry, but also the services provided.
So I think that's good that you explain that, because I want to reassure these people, especially the fairs that rely on those funds, they're still going to be available.
Yes.
And then we mentioned the grant program for UPenn taking roughly $31.5 million out of their funding and another $1.7 for their infectious disease program. Those funds will still be available for UPenn for their veterinarian programs, correct?
So no.
Okay.
And I say maybe because once it's moved from where it is. I mean, we're going to publish sort of the services that we need, and they can bid on services like others can.
Okay.
But it's not a direct connect. I mean, that's just really important to say, and thank you for noting it.
I'm sorry, Mr. Secretary, but how many veterinarian schools that can basically, and the challenge that we're facing is really the large animal vets, right?
Yes.
How many veterinarian schools in Pennsylvania can do that type of education?
That's the only one on the education side.
So we're taking the money from them, even though they're the only ones that can do that?
So the hope is that we, as I noted, I mean, there's four sort of services that we need. There's the diagnostics, the veterinary education and training. There's the research component and the clinical services. The hope is that they bid on those four services. The value here is that we also get a chance to do some things in a new model that we haven't been able to do to address the issues of shortages in the northern tier, vet shortages, and the shortages in the western part of Pennsylvania that you can't get through a line item appropriation to Penn, but maybe you can get by way of a grant program.
Okay, and then speaking of grants, I know there was a lot of questions today about transparency.
Yes.
Perhaps you can provide this to us later, but I think it's important we understand how these grants were awarded, what the criteria were, how they were ranked, how these decisions were made. I think that will help to go a long way towards transparency. And then the biodigester that you mentioned. As you know, we have what I would call a county, multi-county digester under construction in Indiana County, the first of its kind as far as I know in Pennsylvania. So I'm wondering if we have that there already. It is the pilot, right? It's not an official pilot, but it's the first of its kind in Pennsylvania. It's almost ready to go. You toured it with me last year, I believe. So why do we need this $2 million in funding if we already have a model?
Yes, I think we were trying to incentivize the regional models. We've had a lot of inquiries to the Department of Agriculture, through the dairy expansions or nutrient management-driven concerns or regional issues with land loss or land use. So the hope was that we put a marker down for a conversation about how do we best support regional digester and how do we incentivize those. Admittedly, we've got a couple, right? They're really creative models. So I think we can learn from those, but also want to try to incentivize.
Okay, I appreciate that. And then just lastly, real quick, I know that you and I had a discussion at the farm show about solar fields and them being installed over, your top quality soils. And I understand there's some private property issues there, but I do think that's something that we're going to have to address before we do lose those valuable soils, because again, we're talking about agriculture and food. So.
Yeah, listen, I think that's one of the really important conversations. And you can do both, by the way. I say it all the time. Done the map where the 1 through 4 soils are in the state of Pennsylvania, and we're far outnumbered by numbers 5 through 8, right? So really hang on to your most productive soils. It happens to be the same classifications we identify inside 58 county farmland preservation programs that we say we want to protect, and those counties are working to protect. So prioritization, and again, you can do both, but let's be sensitive to the food production.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I appreciate that. And by my calculation, I believe this is your 10th year as Agricultural Secretary?
Yes.
All right. Well, yes, congratulations on that. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank the gentleman. Mr. Secretary, real quick questions. How much of the agriculture workforce are undocumented citizens, or undocumented brothers and sisters, I'll say?
Yeah, and I wish I knew, to be honest. I mean, there's not a good number. There are numbers floated around all over the country. I think it's fair to say that you probably have a quarter of them that are undocumented, but that's an estimate from me, and nothing to back it up.
So you said a quarter of the agricultural workforce in Pennsylvania.
Well, yeah, sorry, Chairman. So to be farm worker or migrant workforce, not total workforce, right? So very specifically, the seasonal farm labor is what I'm referencing.
And you say about a quarter of that population?
That's a guess. I mean, I don't know. I mean, we've had a lot of different numbers tossed around at the American Farm Bureau, and others have tried to determine that. We haven't been able to sort of put our thumb on the number.
Would you call that number, regardless of what it, being able 25, 30, if I said significant, would that be a significant portion of our workforce are undocumented?
No, I would say that there are certainly some, not a significant, not the significant number.
Okay.
But yeah, I think one of the things we're trying to do is to identify who is and what their status is. Certainly, you've got a lot of different categories of workers, right? So part of our challenge is what's the total, but I don't want to dismiss that it's there and they're part in our workforce, but it's not the significant number.
One of the times I met with some of our mushroom company owners. I met with some of our dairy folks.
Yep.
One of the things that they talked to me about was the importance of the undocumented workers in their workforce and in the industry. With what we're seeing at the federal level, if they were wiped out of our workforce, what would that do to agriculture in Pennsylvania?
Well, I think this is where the great reveal comes, right? I think there are a lot of folks who are doing really important work, and they're all really important to agriculture. Can't speak to their status, but agriculture is going to look different both in the state and the nation if you lose those workers, right? There's no question that this landscape looks a lot different. We're trying to celebrate that work and talk about that work, but I think we have to be aware that it's a really important part of, of our farm economy is made possible. People who are here as seasonal labor, as migrant labor, as migratory labor, they're really critical to the workforce.
So there would be a significant impact to our agricultural economy if all of those migrant workers, seasonal workers were removed.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. So I've been in processing plants where there are 17 languages posted on the board.
Wow.
17 languages. I mean, they can't all be from here.
Right.
Right. So this is the reality of that the folks in the workforce are there, and how do you respect them and cultivate that? This is a failure across 5 presidents. Right. We need comprehensive immigration reform.
So how would that affect the end user in the grocery store, in the supermarket, if those workers were removed? What does that look like for my mother going to the fresh grocer up the street from her house?
Yeah, everything here at the end of the day is going to impact the consumer, right? And you've got 2 options in this situation. One is you can try to build that labor and secure the labor, or I think you bring it in by imports. Ultimately, someone's got to go into the fields and into the processing plants and do the work. And if the labor is not there, and we have proven that it's been really, really difficult to get domestic labor to do a lot of these jobs, that you're going to
say that part of it is really...
It's really difficult to get domestic labor to do the types of jobs that we need done on a seasonal basis, or food processing or meat processing. Very difficult. So you've got to have a legal mechanism to try to bring that worker or those workers in.
So I would be, based off of your statements, you would say that undocumented population in Pennsylvania is important to the agriculture economy of Pennsylvania, correct?
I would say that if there are workers today who are in the Pennsylvania doing agriculture work, they are important.
And that those jobs that they currently hold would be hard to be filled domestically, correct? Is that what you said?
Correct.
Okay. And that if they were gone, knowing that those jobs are hard to be filled domestically, the end user, the person going to ShopRite, Fresh Grocer, Giant, any of those supermarkets, would be affected negatively if those folks were not in our workforce doing the work that they're doing today.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, for being here and answering our question, all the work that you do for agriculture in Pennsylvania.
Pleasure.
And with that, we're going to wrap up our hearing with the Department of Agriculture. I just want to say you didn't bring any agriculture with you. So like next year, fruits, vegetables, something, I feel like you should always walk around with like an apple in your pocket or something, you know, agriculture.
We'll take care of that. I know how competitive you are in the cow milking contest.
That's right. I just want y'all to know, like, y'all haven't invited me to cow. I feel like because I was winning so much, y'all didn't want me to come back, but it's okay. Next farm show, I'm gonna look for the invitation. We'll be finishing up this hearing, and we'll be back in about 5, maybe 10 minutes with the judiciary.